Hello everyone, welcome back to the Unstoppable Dad Project, back to it for another week. We didn't do, or when I say we, I mean I didn't do a podcast last week. Where we are, we got thrust into another quote-unquote snap lockdown, and as a result I found it actually really hard to do this podcast from home just because I was a little bit disjointed for the 3 days we were in lockdown. Lucky enough for us, it was only for 3 days, unlike some other parts of this beautiful country of Australia. So we're back to it now. I'm back to the podcast, and I apologise if you were waiting with bated breath for another episode last week. But before I get into today's topic, what I want to ask is the same two favours that I ask you every week or every episode that we do. Number one, subscribe to the podcast on whatever podcast platform it is that you are listening to this on. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, jump on there and leave us a review, because the more subscribers we get, the more reviews we get, the more people that those platforms will put the podcast in front of for us. So if you're able to do that, that helps us out. Number two, jump on and follow us on the socials. So we're at The Unstoppable Dad on Instagram and The Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook. And on the Facebook page, we have a free group called The Unstoppable Dads, which is for a free group for dads, for you to jump in, hopefully get some good information. I'm adding information around training, around nutrition, around lifestyle, around mindset, and around all those things that I've spent the last decade of my life working with people on and working with dads on. So if you want some information, if you find that you're struggling or you just want to jump in there and have some banter with some other dads, then go ahead and add yourself to that. That'll be linked to the Facebook page. All right, so today I'm going to go through, or I'm going to talk about why within training you need to be prioritizing strength. Now, with strength training, when I talk about strength training, I'm talking about, and there are different variations of strength training. There's obviously barbell work, so there's things like back squats, there's deadlifts, there's presses, and there's even bodyweight strength training. Basic calisthenics work, pull-ups, things like that, and you can do a certain amount of strength training. And the reason why I'm talking about that this week is because last week we went into where we are. We went into this snap lockdown for 3 days, and a lot of people that I coach, we had to transition them onto just a bodyweight program, which for a short period of time is fine. Like and not only for a short period of time, like if, for example, the gyms are closed, you go away for a week, you want to keep your training up, and you just want to keep moving and keep, the body active. Having access to a bodyweight program is great. Within our programs that we do, that I offer, whether it be within the gym or it be within the Unstoppable Dad Project, we actually include all year round a bodyweight program as part of our programs that people have access to the whole time. And the main reason for that is, number one, if something like what happened last week happens, we don't have to implement anything new. It's already there. Number two, I think it's actually a handy thing to have there, because especially for someone in, say, our situation with dads, let's say you do go to the gym and you do something, you're doing 2 or 3 days a week in the gym, but then all of a sudden you can't go to work just because maybe the kids are sick, so you've got to stay home with the kids and you're not able to maybe leave the house, but you're feeling fine and you want to just do something. I think having access to somebody telling you what to do makes it a lot easier to then keep the habit up, because as you've probably heard me, if you've listened to some of our previous episodes, you will have probably heard me talk about it ad nauseum. Like, the number one thing that everybody needs to focus on whenever they're trying to implement some form of new behavior, whether it be just implementing physical fitness or trying to better themselves, is consistency. Because all too often what happens when we try and implement something is we try and make it far too complicated, when the thing that's going to get us results and get us results long term is just to build that consistency, right? So if when circumstances don't allow for you to stick to your normal routine, in order to keep this consistency up, you probably need to have something at your disposal that's going to allow you to keep that habit up in a different form, but in a way. But anyway, back to the topic. So a lot of the people that we coach had to revert back to a bodyweight program. And bodyweight programs are good for short-term things to be able to keep the habit up. Circumstances are maybe you can't get into a gym or you don't have access to a home gym and you're not able to do like your regular training. It's also a good way for a lot of people to really get into training because there's a lower barrier for entry, as in you don't need to go and you don't need to invest in a gym, or a gym membership, or you don't need to invest in equipment. You can just start off doing like a good structured bodyweight program. But when you're only doing bodyweight exercises, and I'm not talking about like calisthenic exercises like pull-ups and things like that, because most bodyweight programs that you see, and including ours, don't generally have any type of that, and they're only scalable to a point because there's no external resistance. So as I said, bodyweight programs I believe are good for two things. One, for a short-term thing when you have no other option, or two, to get somebody started. Maybe especially somebody who is a little bit daunted by going to the gym and going and you know they want to maybe get themselves to a base level. I don't believe you need to be at a base level to get started, especially if you are working with a good coach when it comes to your physical fitness. And I hear that a lot. Oh, I want to get fitter before I join the gym. Little bit counterproductive way of thinking, but anyway, to my point, sometimes it is a mental bridge that people need to cross and people need to climb over in order to do it. And one way you can do that is to potentially go and do a bodyweight program to get you started, build some confidence in your own body and start to build that habit, and then that mental jump to go and join a gym and be in a different crowd is not as severe. But with the bodyweight programs, there is a ceiling to it. You can only progress so far. You will only be able to do so much without starting to add some form of external resistance, whether that be something like a barbell or a kettlebell, dumbbells, or it be, adding in like a pull-up bar and adding in some form of calisthenic movements. And this is why we prioritize strength. And the number one thing is, it is great to be fit. It is great to have a good level of cardiovascular fitness. But there are a few major reasons why in all the programs that we do and in all my experience, I always recommend that anybody, especially in our position, someone with kids, someone who is in their 30s or in their 40s, who is limited on time, why your priority should be to do some form of strength training. Now, proper strength training with where you are able to take the time to focus on movement. One thing that does really bug me and really gets under my skin is when people tell you they try and sell the idea of what they are doing from a training point of view as strength training, but really all you're doing is circuit work with dumbbells and barbells and kettlebells. It is not, just because you are using those implements doesn't mean it is strength training. We want proper strength training, and strength training for me really focuses on two different areas. Number one, it allows you to build strength through different movements on different planes of motion. So for example, let's use something like a squat. So you can start off doing a bodyweight squat, and then once you can use that bodyweight squat to start to become more proficient at the movement and build your capacity in it. But then eventually, once you get to a point, if you can do say 5 sets of 20 bodyweight squats, they look great, you're in great position, like that's kind of the ceiling for bodyweight. Then from there you can start to do things like a back squat, and then you can start to progressively overload it. So you can work on getting better at that movement, getting under tension, and trying to build that base and build that strength level. And by doing that, you really do a few different things. The number one reason why we prioritize strength work is, bottom line is, stronger people are harder to kill. Okay, if you have a good base level of strength, and this will be relative to you as an individual, but I will guarantee you life will become a lot easier. It will be easier to pick your kids up. It will be easier to do day-to-day tasks, carrying the groceries from the car, carrying the kids around up hills, taking them for a walk and keeping up with them by having a good base level of strength. Okay, the number two thing is, at the end of the day, regardless of where you are within your life and what you want to achieve, like in the moment, what your initial training goals are, whether it be weight loss, it be strength, or whatever the case might be, the end goal for everybody is the same. we want to stay as independent as we can for as long as possible. And the way we do that is to make sure we have good muscle mass, good bone density, because that stuff will ward off the nursing home for as long as we possibly can. If we do a lot of high level cardiovascular work, it is important. The heart is a muscle and it needs to be worked as well. But if you prioritize fitness, quote unquote fitness, or you prioritize things like, just doing, say, really long cardiovascular workouts where you're not looking to increase your base level of strength, then what will happen is you can find, especially as we get older, that muscle will start to atrophy. And what I mean by atrophy is it starts to shrink. And when we start to lose muscle mass, and it happens to everybody, it means that things become harder to do. It becomes harder for us to hold ourselves up. It becomes harder for us to move from point A to point B. And then when we get old enough, once we get to the point when we're now reliant on other people to do things for us, that is where our quality of life decreases. So by earlier on in the piece, prioritizing strength work within your training, you are going to prolong that from happening by having more natural muscle mass and undertaking the process of doing some form of structured strength training, which structured strength training is designed to improve your lean muscle mass and in turn increase the amount of lean muscle mass you have. You are going to prolong that. You are going to be able to stay independent for longer. And I can't quote the study, but I know there has been a study done on the correlation between muscle mass in somebody's legs and nursing home admissions. And obviously the reason for that, if we oversimplify the whole thing, is because the more muscle mass you have in your legs, the easier it is going to be for you to move independently. Therefore, while you are able to move independently, you are going to not require assistance. Therefore, you are less likely to have to be placed in a nursing home where you are going to need somebody to help you do everyday tasks. So that is, realistically, that is the sole reason why with all our programs we will prioritize strength, because most people that I'm working with, we're talking about they're in their 30s, they're in their 40s, they have kids, and that doesn't matter whether it's the dad project or it's within the gym. And they're starting to look to their quality of life not only now but later on, because they want to be able to be there for their kids and then in turn for their grandkids, and they want to be able to be active with them. They don't want to be a burden on their family, and by prioritizing strength work within your training at an earlier age, you're going to be able to ward that off. Now, this is all obviously dependent on making sure you're doing it right. I'm not talking about putting on massive amounts of lean muscle mass and being a bodybuilder. I'm also not talking about going and being like the highest of the high level power lifters and the highest of the high level Olympic weightlifters, because then we start talking about training for performance rather than training for overall health. So it's important that when you look at a strength training program, you're obviously, one, doing it within your capability, but two, you're looking at how this is going to be able to be implemented in your life long term, and how sustainable is this long term. Because when you're training for performance, so when you are trying to, for a lot of people, especially when they start training in their 30s, deadlifting 200 kilos might not be achievable, and in order to get there, they have to go from being able to do that in a balanced way to moving through into an unbalanced way, because we start to train for performance. And depending on what's going on with previous injuries, potential limitations, you may find that it's just unachievable. So sometimes chasing those numbers is not important, but it's more about doing the habit and prioritizing that strength and prioritizing working on building strength throughout your body and doing it in a way where it's going to enable you to live a more fulfilled life for longer. Because I can tell you now, and from my experience in dealing with people, cardiovascular health is something that needs to be put in, And I think for somebody who's, not doing any other sport, doesn't really have any other priorities, a good kind of split from a training point of view would be to do 2 to 3 days of strength work a week, and then adding in some form of, even just monostructural cardiovascular work, whether it be, going for, a run, going for, just jumping on a bike or a rowing machine or something like that, and doing that for 20 to 30 minutes, on another day, or even 2 each week. If you have 5 days to train, then that's a good split, doing, 2 to 3 strength days and then doing 2 to 3 conditioning days. But I think that the strength training needs to be prioritized first, especially the later on in life you get, and then the conditioning piece needs to be laid into it. And for me, that is how I have always structured our programs when we're working with people. It is strength first, and then we layer the conditioning piece into it. We've got some programs that we do where we break each session into 2 components or 3 components. So we do some form of structured strength training, and then we layer some conditioning into the top of it. And that's quite an effective way to structure your training. There are a whole bunch of ways you can do it. But the number one thing, and the thing I wanted to put out in this podcast, is make sure you prioritize your strength. Prioritize, because it is going to make everything a whole bunch easier. Yes, it is important to be cardiovascularly fit. You don't want to make sure you're putting on too much excess muscle mass, because that does have a load on your heart, and on your, your overall body and your joints. But finding that healthy medium where you are as strong as you can be, you are feeling as healthy as you can be, and you do have a good base level. But the priority as we get older, and especially if you're short on time, I'll give you a bit of a breakdown on, say for example, how we structure the strength training within the DAD project. We do 4 days of strength training this is just within our program, our training program. And we have 2 mandatory days and 2 optional days. So basically the reason for that is we want you to train at a minimum 2 days a week. And those mandatory days are going to take you probably about anywhere from 50 to maybe 70 minutes, okay? So that's you're looking at less than 3 hours a week that you've got to do as a minimum. And then most weeks, most people will be able to fit that in. So you do your 2 days. And then there'll be other weeks where you'll have a little bit more time. So if you want to start to squeeze a little bit more in, you can start to do, the optional days that we've got there. Some people are able to do 4 days, some people are able to do 2, some people are able to do 3. So the idea is to choose your own adventure based off the time you have available for yourself. But then outside of that, and outside of those strength days, we recommend that you do things like go for a walk, go for a run. The fact is, when you have kids, involving them in your physical fitness instills in them a good value that they should prioritize time for themselves and prioritize their physical fitness and their physical well-being. And I think doing things with the family and including them in that is important, and it's just as important as prioritizing that time for yourself. So doing something when you're a dad that is flexible, but still prioritizing that strength piece is very, very important. Because if you prioritize strength, you will be able to have a better quality of life, and you will be able to stay independent for longer, which, regardless of who you are or where you're at, is the end goal for every single person. All right, hopefully that helps. If you need any help around training, obviously that's been my major forte for a long time now. So feel free to just drop me a message or drop me an email. Jump on the Facebook pages, jump on the Instagram pages. You can reach out there via DM and we can help you out. Other than that, jump on into the Unstoppable Dads Facebook group and we'll see you in there, or we'll see you on the podcast next week. Thanks very much. Have a great week. See you soon. Bye.